Hey there! Tonight we're traveling back, way back, to a time before Zeus hurled his thunderbolts, before Athena sprang from foreheads, before Aphrodite rose from sea foam. We're going to the very beginning, to an age when the world was young and wild, when giants walked the earth, and when the universe itself was still finding its shape. This is the age of the Titans, the first rulers of the cosmos, the ancient gods who came before the Olympians we know so well. If you're settling in for the night and stories like this help you drift off, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it brings you some peace, and maybe drop a comment of who your favorite Greek god is. So dim your lights, get comfortable, and let's step back into the mists of time to an era when the gods were different, when the rules were still being written, and when creation itself was still fresh and raw. Let's begin at the very beginning. In the beginning was chaos. Before there was anything, there was nothing. Not the comfortable nothing of an empty room or a quiet night. This was absolute nothing, a void so complete that even darkness would have been something. The ancient Greeks called it chaos, and it wasn't a place or a thing so much as it was the absence of everything. No light, no shadow, no up or down, no here or there, just potential, just possibility hanging in the emptiness, waiting. And then, slowly, something stirred. From that infinite void, the first beings came into existence, not born, not created, but simply emerging like thoughts forming in a vast mind. First came Gaia, the earth herself. She wasn't a goddess standing on the ground. She was the ground. She was the mountains and valleys, the soil and stone, broad and eternal and solid. She was foundation, the first anchor in an anchorless universe. Next came Tartarus, a shadowy abyss deep below where even Gaia ended, a place of darkness and suffering that would one day serve as the prison of gods. Then Eros appeared, not the chubby cherub with arrows that we picture today, but something far more primal, a fundamental force drawing things together, making creation possible, the impulse that drives the universe toward union and life. Erebus emerged, darkness personified, and with him came Nyx, the night. These two would give birth to Ether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, the day. Light and dark, day and night, the first cycles beginning to take shape. The universe was learning to breathe, to pulse with rhythm and pattern. But most importantly for our story, Gaia, alone and perhaps lonely in her vastness, brought forth Uranus, the sky. She created him equal to herself, a canopy to cover her completely, to be an eternal home for the blessed gods who would come. Uranus stretched over Gaia like a dome of stars and air, and together they became the first divine couple. Earth and sky, the foundation upon which all other myths would be built. Picture it, a world with just two beings, massive and powerful, locked in an eternal embrace. Gaia below, solid and nurturing, and Uranus above, distant and cold. Their union would produce the next generation of divine beings, and with them, the real story begins. The children of heaven and earth. When Gaia and Uranus came together, their offspring were unlike anything the universe had seen. These weren't ordinary children. These were cosmic forces given form, powers that would shape reality itself. And they came in three distinct groups: each more remarkable and terrible than the last. First came the Titans, 12 in all, 6 sons and 6 daughters. They were enormous, powerful beings who embodied fundamental aspects of the natural world and cosmic order. The sons were Oceanus, whose very body was the great river that encircled the world; Coeus, who represented the axis of heaven around which the stars revolved; Creus, another pillar of cosmic order; Hyperion, who would father the sun, moon, and dawn; Iapetus, who would sire some of mythology's most famous figures; and youngest of all, Cronus, who would become the most significant titan of them all. The daughters, the Titanesses, were equally powerful. Tethys, who partnered with Oceanus to create all the world's fresh water; Theia, the shining goddess of light and sight, who made precious metals gleam and gave mortals the gift of vision; Rhea, who would become the Great Mother; Themis, who embodied divine law and natural order; Mnemosyne, the living memory of the cosmos; and Phoebe, the bright goddess associated with prophecy and the moon. But Uranus and Gaia also produced other children, and these were less pleasing to the eye. The Cyclopes, 3 massive one-eyed giants named Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, whose names meant thunder, lightning, and brightness. They were master craftsmen, able to forge weapons of unimaginable power, but their appearance disturbed Uranus. How could a sky god, beautiful and distant, accept sons with only one eye in the center of their faces? And then there were the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges. Each had 50 heads and 100 arms, mountains of strength and chaos given flesh. They were the ultimate warriors, able to hurl boulders like rain, but to Uranus, they were abominations, proof that something had gone terribly wrong in creation. Here's where our story takes its first dark turn. Uranus, looking upon his children, felt not love, but revulsion. The Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires especially filled him with disgust and dread. What if these monstrous offspring turned against him? What if their very existence threatened his reign over the cosmos? His fear curdled into cruelty, and he made a decision that would echo through the ages. He took his monstrous children and thrust them back into Gaia's womb, shoving them deep into the dark places beneath the earth, into Tartarus, where they would never see daylight again. Imagine the pain of a mother forced to contain her children inside her, unable to birth them properly, feeling them trapped and suffering in her depths. Gaia's anguish was immense, a geological agony that made the earth groan. But Uranus didn't stop there. Even the Titans, beautiful as they were, made him nervous. He kept them close, monitored them, never fully trusted them. He ruled the cosmos with an iron fist, sky pressing down on earth, giving no space, no freedom, no room to breathe. His paranoia became tyranny, and tyranny always plants the seeds of rebellion. The Titans grew under their father's suspicious gaze, powerful and resentful. Gaia's pain grew too, the weight of imprisoned children and a domineering husband crushing her. She couldn't bear it anymore. She needed help. She needed someone brave enough, or angry enough, or hungry enough for power to stand against the sky itself. She needed a champion, and she would find one in the most unexpected place, in her youngest son, the one who had been watching and waiting, the one who had been thinking and planning, the one called Cronus. The fall of Uranus. Gaia's suffering reached a breaking point. She could no longer endure the weight of her imprisoned children or the oppression of Uranus. From deep within the earth, she forged a weapon, a massive sickle made from adamant, a primordial metal harder than anything else in existence, grey and gleaming and sharp enough to cut through divinity itself. Then she called her Titan children together, those 12 mighty beings who had grown in the shadow of their father's fear. She held out the sickle, and her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of geological ages. "Your father has wronged us," she said. "He has imprisoned your brothers, shown nothing but cruelty and paranoia. Will one of you help me? Will one of you free your siblings and end this tyranny?" Silence fell. The Titans looked at each other, at the weapon, at their mother's desperate face. They knew what she was asking. They knew the risk. Uranus was the sky itself, vast and seemingly invincible. To strike at him was to strike at the cosmos. One by one, they looked away. Oceanus, wise and cautious. Hyperion, brilliant but unwilling. Coeus, Creus, Iapetus, all powerful, all afraid. But Cronus didn't look away. The youngest of the Titans had been born last, had always been underestimated, had spent his whole existence watching his elder siblings receive attention while he observed from the margins. He had a sharp mind and patience to match, a dangerous combination. He saw opportunity where others saw only danger. He saw power waiting to be seized. "I will do it," Cronus said, and took the sickle from his mother's hands. Gaia hid him in a place where sky meets earth, a crevice where Uranus would come when night fell to lie with his wife as he did each evening. The other Titans, though they hadn't volunteered for the deed, agreed to help hold their father down. 4 of them, Hyperion, Coeus, Creus, and Iapetus, would position themselves at the 4 corners of the earth, the cardinal points, ready to grasp the sky when the moment came. Evening fell. Uranus, unsuspecting, descended from the heights. He spread himself across Gaia, vast and encompassing, ready for their nightly union. The 4 Titan brothers seized him at the corners, holding sky in place. And Cronus, hiding in the darkness, struck. The sickle cut through divine flesh in one terrible motion. Cronus castrated his father, separating sky from earth in the most violent way imaginable. Uranus's scream must have echoed across creation, a sound of agony and fury and disbelief. His children had betrayed him. His wife had armed them. His reign was over. Cronus flung the severed genitals away, and they tumbled through the air before splashing into the sea far from land. But gods don't bleed like mortals, and the consequences of this act rippled out in strange and powerful ways. Where Uranus's blood struck the earth, 3 groups of beings sprang up. The Erinyes, the Furies, terrible goddesses of vengeance with serpents in their hair and blood in their eyes, were born to punish crimes against the natural order, especially the murder of kin. The giants, huge and powerful, emerged from those same drops, beings of earth and violence. And the Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree, graceful and wild, took root and began to spread across the world. But the strangest birth happened in the sea. Where the severed genitals fell into the water, a white foam began to spread across the waves. It churned and sparkled, and from it rose a figure of impossible beauty. Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, was born fully grown from the violence of that act, beauty from brutality, love from hatred. She stepped onto the shore at Cyprus, leaving footprints that would bloom with flowers, and even the wind seemed to pause in awe. Uranus, wounded and weakened, retreated to the upper reaches of the cosmos. In his pain and rage, he cursed his children, especially Cronus. "You have overthrown me with treachery," he gasped. "But know this, you too shall be overthrown by your own offspring. The same fate awaits you. This I decree." The words hung in the air like thunder, a prophecy that would shape everything to come. But Cronus, holding the bloody sickle, newly crowned king of the cosmos, chose not to listen. Or perhaps he listened too well. Perhaps the seed of paranoia planted by his father took root immediately. Either way, the age of Uranus was over. The age of the Titans had begun. The Golden Age. With Uranus cast down, Cronus ascended to supreme power. He freed his monstrous brothers from Tartarus, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, though some accounts say he soon grew wary of them and locked them away again, proving he'd learned more from his father than he might have wished. He took his sister Rhea as his wife, as was the way among the immortals, and together they ruled from Mount Olympus, a peak that would later become famous for very different gods. And the world changed. The age that followed Cronus's victory became known as the Golden Age, a time unlike any that would come after. It was an era of peace and plenty, when the harsh edges of existence seemed to soften, when the earth gave freely of her bounty, and when suffering was a stranger to both gods and mortals. Humanity existed in this time, though their origins are told in various ways. Some say Prometheus molded them from clay. Others say they sprang from the earth itself, children of Gaia, just like the gods. Either way, these first humans were called the Golden Race, and they lived lives that would make paradise look modest. Imagine it, a world without toil. The earth produced food without needing to be farmed. Fruit hung heavy on trees year-round. The weather was always mild, never too hot or cold. There were no seasons in the harsh sense, just an eternal spring where flowers bloomed and grain grew without any human effort. People wandered through meadows and forests, gathering what they needed, living in simple happiness. There was no concept of ownership because there was no scarcity, no wars because there was nothing to fight over, no grief because death, when it finally came after many long years, arrived gently, like falling asleep after a satisfying day. And when these golden humans died, they didn't disappear entirely. They became spirits, benevolent guardians who watched over their descendants, invisible protectors, ensuring the cycle of peace continued. The gods themselves walked among mortals more openly in those days. The distance between divine and human wasn't as vast as it would become. Cronus and Rhea held court, and the other titans took on their various roles, managing the cosmos. It was a time of order, of things working as they should, of the universe finally settling into a rhythm after the chaos of its birth and the violence of its early power struggles. But here's the thing about golden ages. They're called that because they're rare and don't last. They're the exception, not the rule. And the very prophecy that Uranus had spoken was already working its way toward fulfillment, hidden in Cronus's growing paranoia, waiting for the right moment to emerge. For now, though, the world was at peace. The Titans had their roles, humanity had its happiness, and Cronus sat on his throne, powerful and secure. Or so it seemed. The Titans in their glory. Before we move forward to the inevitable fall, let's pause and truly look at these Titans, these first gods who shaped the cosmos. Each of them embodied something fundamental, and together they formed a complete picture of how the ancient Greeks understood their world. Oceanus, the eldest, was perhaps the most powerful after Cronus. He wasn't just a god of water, he was water, specifically the great river that the ancients believed encircled the entire world. Picture a massive stream flowing around the edge of the earth, its source and mouth the same, an eternal current that marked the boundary between the known world and whatever lay beyond. Oceanus's realm included not just that boundary river, but all fresh water everywhere. Rivers, springs, streams, wells, even the rain that fell from the sky. He and his wife Tethys produced an astounding number of children, 3,000 river gods, each one governing a different waterway, and 3,000 Oceanids, nymphs of springs and streams, each more beautiful than the last. Oceanus was also associated with the rising and setting of celestial bodies. The ancients believed the sun, moon, and stars rose from his waters in the east each morning and sank back into them in the west each evening. He was the keeper of cosmic cycles, the great wheel of water that turned endlessly. In some very ancient traditions, before Hesiod's version became standard, Oceanus and Tethys were considered the first divine couple, parents of all the gods, which speaks to just how fundamental water was to early Greek thought. What's remarkable about Oceanus is that when the Great War came later, he chose not to take sides. Sources suggest he remained neutral during the Titanomachy, perhaps out of wisdom, perhaps recognizing that prophecy would run its course regardless of his involvement. Whether this was caution or genuine disagreement with Cronus's methods, the result was the same. He sent his daughter Styx to fight on Zeus's side, and according to some accounts, he and Tethys even cared for Hera during the conflict. This earned him freedom after the Titans fell, though one could argue that imprisoning the ocean itself would have been impossible anyway. His waters continued to flow, his boundaries remained in place, and he kept his role in the new order. Tethys, his wife and sister, was the great nurse, the sustainer of life. While Oceanus was the water itself, Tethys was the distribution system, the force that sent his fresh waters flowing through underground channels to feed springs and wells across the earth. Her name means nurse, or grandmother, and she lived up to it, not only raising her own vast brood, but serving as caretaker for other gods' children as well. When Hera needed a safe place during the war, Tethys took her in. When Helios and Selene were infants, Tethys nursed them, helping their weak early light grow stronger. She was the ultimate divine caregiver, embodying the nurturing aspect of water that gives life rather than the destructive power of flood and storm. Next came Hyperion and Theia, the Titan couple of light. Hyperion's name means the High One, or he who goes above, and he represented the light of heaven, the bright upper air where the sun travels. Some sources suggest he actually was an early sun god, before his son Helios took over that role completely. Theia, whose name means divine or goddess, was the embodiment of sight and the shining light of the clear blue sky. She was said to have given gold its gleam and made diamonds sparkle, bestowing radiance on precious things. Together, they blessed the first humans with the gift of sight, the ability to perceive light and therefore navigate the world. Their children became some of the most important gods in the Greek pantheon. Helios, the sun, would drive his golden chariot across the sky each day, pulled by 4 fire-breathing horses, seeing everything that happened in the world below. Selene, the moon, would follow in her own silver chariot at night, her pale beauty illuminating darkness. And Eos, the rosy-fingered dawn, would open the gates of heaven each morning, her pink and gold fingers pulling back night's curtain so her brother could ride forth. These three celestial deities were absolutely crucial to ancient Greek religion, even though technically they were second-generation Titans rather than Olympians. The cycles of day and night, the passage of time itself, depended on their constant movement. Hyperion apparently chose Cronus's side during the war, because afterwards, ancient sources tell us he was imprisoned in Tartarus, though some traditions hint that he may have eventually been released. After all, the embodiment of heavenly light itself would be difficult to contain permanently. Either way, his children continued their duties, regardless of which gods ruled from Olympus, because the cosmos needed sun, moon, and dawn, no matter who sat on the throne. Coeus and Phoebe were more abstract titans, representing intellect and prophecy. Coeus, whose name is related to the word for query or questioning, was the titan of the axis of heaven, the cosmic pole around which the celestial sphere rotated. He embodied rational inquiry, intelligence, and perhaps astronomy, the study of the heavens' movements. He was one of the four brothers who held Uranus down during the castration, positioned at the north pole of the cosmic axis, and this role seems fitting for one who represented celestial mechanics. His wife Phoebe, whose name means bright or pure, was associated with prophecy and the moon. She was one of the early holders of the oracle at Delphi, that famous shrine where mortals came to receive cryptic predictions about their futures. Eventually, she passed this oracle to her grandson Apollo, but her connection to prophecy remained. Her daughter Leto would become mother to Apollo and Artemis, making Phoebe grandmother to two of the most powerful Olympians, which allowed her line to continue in importance even after the Titans fell. Together, Coeus and Phoebe represented the intellectual and mystical sides of knowledge, Coeus the rational study of cosmos and mathematics, Phoebe the intuitive understanding that comes through prophecy and divine inspiration. They were balanced opposites united in marriage. Creus, one of the more mysterious titans, seems to have represented the constellations and the measurements of the year. His name might be related to words meaning ram, possibly connecting him to the constellation Aries. He married Eurybia, a daughter of Pontus the Sea, and their children were Astraeus, god of the stars and planets, Pallas, the titan of warcraft and the springtime campaign season, and Perseus, the titan of destruction. Through Astraeus, Creus became grandfather to the four winds, Boreas, Zephyrus, Notus, and Eurus, who blew from the four cardinal directions and were crucial for sailing. His line was all about cycles, seasons, and the passage of time marked by stellar movements. Then we come to Iapetus, and his family tree grows fascinating. Iapetus married the Oceanid Clymene, and they had four sons who would become central figures in mythology. First was Atlas, who would one day be condemned to hold up the sky as punishment for fighting against Zeus. Second was Menoetius, violent and rash, who would be struck down by Zeus's thunderbolt during the war. Third was Prometheus, the forward-thinking titan who would steal fire for humanity and be punished eternally. And fourth was Epimetheus, the afterthought, who would marry Pandora and inadvertently release suffering into the world. Iapetus himself seems to have been associated with mortality and the finite lifespan of humans. His sons, particularly Prometheus and Epimetheus, were deeply involved in human affairs, and the stories about them explore themes of mortality, suffering, foresight, and hindsight. Iapetus stood as one of the 4 pillars during Uranus's castration, positioned at the west, the direction of sunset and symbolic end of things. He fought on Cronus's side during the war and was subsequently imprisoned in Tartarus, but his son's actions would shape human existence more than almost any Olympians. Now, the Titanesses each had their own crucial roles. Themis was perhaps the most important after Rhea. Her name literally means divine law, or that which is laid down, and she embodied the natural order of things, the way the cosmos should function, both in nature and in society. She was an oracular goddess, holding authority at Delphi before Phoebe and Apollo. After the war, she would become Zeus's second wife, after Metis, and bear him the Horae, goddesses of the seasons and natural time, and the Moirae, the fates who spun, measured, and cut the thread of every mortal life. Themis was crucial because she represented something beyond power. She represented rightness, propriety, justice, not as punishment, but as proper order. When Zeus held his council, Themis sat beside him as advisor, ensuring his rule followed proper, divine law. She was stability itself, the foundation of legitimate authority, which is probably why she sided with Zeus during the war. She recognized that the old order under Cronus had become corrupt, that prophecy demanded change, and she positioned herself with justice rather than with her own family. Mnemosyne, whose name means memory, was the living embodiment of remembrance itself. In a world without writing, memory was everything. It was history, culture, identity, the preservation of knowledge across generations. Mnemosyne was that preservation made divine. Zeus would later spend 9 nights with her, and from their union would come the 9 muses: Calliope, Clio, Erato, Euterpe, Melpomene, Polyhymnia, Terpsichore, Thalia, and Urania. Each muse governed a different art or science, and together they represented the pinnacle of human achievement in culture and learning. Through Mnemosyne, the Titans maintained a connection to the new order, because memory and art are essential. You cannot have civilization without the ability to remember, to record, to pass knowledge forward. The Muses became some of the most invoked deities in ancient Greece, called upon by poets and philosophers and historians. Every great work began with an invocation to the Muses, a request for inspiration and the gift of memory. In this way, Mnemosyne's influence never faded, even after the Titans fell. Rhea, wife of Cronus, was the Great Mother. Her name might be related to flow or ease, and she embodied fertility, motherhood, and the generation of life. She was often equated with Cybele, the Phrygian mother goddess, and with the very concept of female fertility itself. Her relationship with Cronus would define much of Titan mythology, as we'll see, because she was both his wife and, eventually, his opponent. She chose her children over her husband, chose the future over the past, and in doing so enabled the entire change from Titan rule to Olympian rule. These 12 Titans, along with their various offspring, formed the first true divine society. They weren't just forces of nature, they were personalities, individuals with relationships, conflicts, and agendas. They married each other, had children, established domains and hierarchies. They created the template for how gods would function in Greek mythology: powerful, immortal, but prone to very human emotions and failings. Together, They ruled the cosmos during the Golden Age, each managing their own sphere, all subordinate to Cronus and Rhea at the top. It was an ordered system, a functioning pantheon, the first attempt at divine government. And it worked for a while. But prophecy waits for no one, and the words of Uranus were already in motion. The Golden Age was beautiful, but gold is a soft metal, easily bent, easily melted, and the forces that would reshape everything were already being set in motion, hidden in Cronus's increasingly troubled mind. The prophecy takes root. Cronus should have been content. He sat at the pinnacle of power, ruling the cosmos with his sister wife Rhea beside him. The world prospered under his reign. The other titans respected his authority. He had achieved what he'd wanted. His father cast down, himself elevated, order established. He should have been satisfied, but Uranus's curse echoed in his mind like a drumbeat that never stopped. You too shall be overthrown by your own offspring. Those words, spoken in pain and rage, had the weight of prophecy, and prophecy in Greek mythology is not suggestion, it's destiny speaking. Cronus couldn't unhear them. They haunted his dreams and poisoned his waking thoughts. At first, perhaps he dismissed them. Old gods' curses, death rattles, meaningless threats from the defeated. But as time passed and Rhea became pregnant, the words grew louder in his mind. His child, his offspring. Hadn't he himself proven that children could overthrow fathers? Hadn't he shown exactly how it could be done? If anything, he'd provided the blueprint. Fear is a subtle poison. It starts small, a whisper of worry, and grows into paranoid certainty. Cronus looked at his power and saw it as fragile. He looked at his wife's pregnancy and saw a threat. He looked at the future and saw only his own downfall. When Rhea gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Hestia, Cronus made his decision. He would not be overthrown. He would not suffer the fate he'd inflicted on his father. He would control destiny itself. He took the newborn infant and swallowed her whole. Imagine Rhea's horror. Her child, just born, still wet from the womb, torn from her arms and swallowed by her own husband. Hestia disappeared down Cronus's throat, alive, but trapped in the darkness of his stomach, neither able to die nor to live properly. Immortal beings cannot be digested, cannot be killed easily. She remained there, aware, waiting. Rhea wept and raged, but Cronus was immovable. This is how it must be, he told her, his voice the voice of a king who would tolerate no opposition. I will not be overthrown. The second child came, a daughter named Demeter, swallowed. The third, another daughter, Hera, beautiful even as an infant, swallowed. The fourth, a son named Hades, serious-faced and solemn, swallowed. The fifth, another son, Poseidon, with sea-grey eyes, swallowed. 5 children, all trapped in their father's belly, conscious and growing in that terrible prison. 5 times Rhea suffered birth only to have her child immediately stolen. 5 times she pleaded with Cronus to see reason, to remember the prophecy, to understand that trying to avoid fate often brings it about. 5 times he refused. By the 5th pregnancy, Rhea had reached her limit. Pain has a way of clarifying purpose, and her purpose became crystal clear. She would save her next child no matter what it took. If Cronus wanted to avoid prophecy through monstrous means, she would embrace prophecy and help it along. She went to her mother, Gaia, the same one who had helped overthrow Uranus. She went to what remained of her father's consciousness scattered across the sky. She asked for help, for guidance, for any way to save her next child and end her husband's tyranny. And they gave her a plan. When her sixth child was born, Rhea was ready. The birth happened in secret, in a cave on the island of Crete, far from Cronus's notice. The baby was a boy, powerful even as a newborn, with eyes that seemed to hold lightning. She named him Zeus, which means bright or sky, names that echoed both his grandfather and his destiny. She left him there, in the cave, protected by the Curetes, divine warriors who clashed their spears against their shields to drown out the baby's cries, ensuring Cronus wouldn't hear. Nymphs cared for Zeus. A divine goat named Amalthea nursed him with milk so rich it practically glowed with power. He grew in that cave, hidden and safe, learning about his siblings trapped in his father's stomach, learning about the prophecy, learning about his purpose. Meanwhile, Rhea returned to Cronus with a stone. She'd found a rock roughly the size and shape of a baby, and she'd wrapped it carefully in swaddling clothes, the way one would wrap an infant. When Cronus demanded his sixth child, she handed him the bundle. And Cronus, so consumed by fear that he'd stopped looking carefully, so certain of his own power that he'd grown careless, swallowed the stone without checking. It's almost funny, in a dark way. The Lord of the cosmos, the king who'd overthrown heaven itself, fooled by a rock in a blanket. But paranoia makes you stupid even as it makes you cruel. He was so focused on preventing the prophecy that he'd stopped thinking clearly. He took the bundle, tilted back his head, and swallowed it whole, just as he'd done with his other children. The stone sank into his stomach, settling among his imprisoned offspring. Satisfied that threat number 6 had been neutralized, Cronus went back to ruling. The Golden Age continued, at least on the surface. Mortals still lived in peace, crops still grew, the Titans still managed their domains. But underneath, like a cancer growing in the bones of the world, Cronus's fear festered. He'd become exactly what he'd rebelled against, a tyrant ruling through violence, so afraid of losing power that he'd destroyed his own family to keep it. And in a cave on Crete, his actual 6th child grew stronger by the day. Zeus rises. The child in the cave didn't have a normal childhood, but then nothing about this situation was normal. Zeus grew up knowing exactly who he was and what he was meant to do. The nymphs who raised him told him stories of his siblings trapped in their father's belly. The Curetes taught him strategy and combat. Amalthea's divine milk made him grow fast and strong. Some accounts say he reached full maturity in just a year. Others say it took longer. But either way, Zeus didn't waste time in childhood innocence. He was being prepared for war from day one. Gaia visited him in dreams, or perhaps in person. The myths vary. She told him about the prophecy, about how destiny demanded he overthrow his father, about how the cosmos needed new rulers because the Titans had become stagnant, locked in their ways. The Golden Age was nice, yes, but it wasn't progress. It was an eternal plateau, changeless and therefore lifeless in its own way. The universe needed to evolve, and Zeus was evolution personified. According to later accounts, Zeus had help from Meti, the Oceanid goddess of wisdom and cunning. She prepared a special potion. Some sources describe it as containing mustard and wine. Others mention more complex ingredients that would cause violent vomiting. The details of how Zeus administered this potion vary between tellings. Some accounts suggest he disguised himself as a cupbearer, serving at Cronus's table. Others present different scenarios. What's consistent across versions is that Zeus somehow got Cronus to consume the mixture, and almost immediately Cronus's stomach began to rebel. The Titan king doubled over, clutching his belly. His face turned strange colors, and then, with a violent spasm that shook the mountain, he vomited. First came the stone, the fake Zeus, still wrapped in its now ancient swaddling clothes. It shot from his mouth and landed with a heavy thud. Zeus would later place this stone at Delphi as a monument, the Omphalos, the navel of the world, marking the center of Earth and the spot where everything changed. But Cronus wasn't done. His stomach heaved again, and this time what emerged was Poseidon, full-grown and furious, after years trapped in darkness. Another heave, and Hades appeared, solemn and grim. Then Hera, regal and already queenly, despite her ordeal. Then Demeter, shaking but determined. Finally Hestia, the first swallowed, the last freed, gentle-faced, but with iron in her spine. 5 gods stood before Cronus, all adult, all angry, all ready for vengeance. And behind them stood Zeus, the 6th, the one who'd never been swallowed, the one who'd made this possible. Cronus, weakened by the purging, looked at his children and knew the prophecy had come true. Everything he'd done to prevent this moment had only made it possible. If he'd just raised his children normally, they might have remained loyal. They might have supported his rule. But by trying to destroy them, he'd guaranteed they would destroy him instead. Prophecy is funny that way. It fulfills itself through the very attempts to avoid it. The 6 siblings, reunited for the first time, made a pact right there. They would overthrow their father. They would free their imprisoned aunts and uncles from Tartarus. They would establish a new order. Zeus, as the liberator, would lead them. The others agreed, though perhaps some already had reservations about putting another powerful male in charge, given their experience with Cronus and Uranus. But Zeus at least seemed better than what they had. And in revolution, you don't always get to be picky about your leaders. Word spread quickly through the cosmos. The swallowed children were free. Zeus was calling the Titans to choose sides. Would they stand with Cronus, the old order, the king who ate his children? Or would they support the younger gods, the victims turned victors, the promise of something new? Some Titans made their choice immediately. Themis, goddess of divine law, looked at what Cronus had become and sided with Zeus. The prophecy was clear. Justice demanded change, and she would stand with justice. Oceanus remained neutral, citing his ancient authority and refusing to take sides in his siblings' war. Prometheus, the forward-thinking son of Iapetus, saw where things were headed and allied with Zeus, bringing his cunning intelligence to the younger god's cause. His brother Atlas made the opposite choice, standing with Cronus and the old order. Other Titans rallied to Cronus. Hyperion, perhaps out of loyalty to his fellow first-generation Titan. Iapetus, father of Atlas. Creus, Coeus, and others saw Zeus as an upstart, a child who'd gotten lucky, not a legitimate ruler. The cosmos split down the middle, old versus new, tradition versus change, father versus son. Both sides gathered their forces. Cronus and his allies took Mount Othrys as their fortress, a peak in central Greece that they fortified and made into an impregnable stronghold. Zeus and his siblings claimed Mount Olympus, the tallest mountain in Greece, whose peak was so high it was often hidden in clouds. From these 2 mountains, separated by a valley that would become their battleground, they prepared for war. The stage was set. The prophecy had come to pass, and the cosmos itself held its breath, because what was coming would shake the foundations of reality. The Titanomachy, the war between Titans and Olympians, was about to begin. The Titanomachy begins. When divine beings go to war, the world suffers. This isn't metaphor. When gods fight, reality itself bends and breaks around them. The Titanomachy began not with a declaration or a speech, but with Zeus hurling the first thunderbolt. It split the sky from horizon to horizon, a white-hot tear in the blue, and the sound that followed wasn't thunder so much as the universe screaming. The war would last 10 years. 10 years of continuous combat, of mountains shaking and seas boiling, of the sun and moon struggling to complete their courses while gods battled beneath them. 10 years, during which mortals huddled in caves and prayed to whoever might listen, while the golden age crumbled around them like an old piece of bread turning to dust. Mount Olympus and Mount Othrys became cosmic fortresses. Zeus's forces, himself, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, along with their Titan allies, launched assaults from Olympus. Cronus's army, the loyal Titans and their children, defended from Othrys. Between them, the valley of Thessaly became a wasteland where even grass feared to grow. Picture it, Zeus with his lightning, already terrifying even though he'd only recently acquired it. Poseidon with his new forged trident, making the earth quake with every strike against the ground, sending tidal waves crashing against Othrys's foundations. Hades, grim and relentless, had already begun to embody death itself, his very presence making enemies falter. Hera, though not yet the jealous wife of myth, was formidable in her fury, goddess of air and sovereignty, capable of stirring storms. Demeter could make the ground beneath enemies' feet turn treacherous, or cause crops to wither, starving out defenders. Even gentle Hestia had her role, maintaining the sacred fire of the Olympian camp, ensuring her siblings had a home to return to. Against them stood Titans, who'd existed since the dawn of creation. Cronus with his sickle, the same one that had castrated Uranus, now dripping with ichor from Olympian wounds. Hyperion, burning bright as his children the sun and moon, too blazing to look at directly. Iapetus with his spear of twilight, each thrust seeming to drag vitality from his opponents. Atlas, possibly the strongest of all beings, a mountain of muscle and fury, who could grab opponents and simply crush them. Creus commanding the winds, using them as weapons to throw enemies from cliffs. Coeus twisting the very axis of heaven, making everything tilt and sway until combatants couldn't tell up from down. The fighting was brutal and endless. During the day, they clashed in the valley. At night, they retreated to their mountains to tend wounds that would heal by morning, only to begin again. Gods can't die easily, which meant every battle was fought to exhaustion, not death. They stabbed and battered each other. They burned and froze and shocked, but everyone got back up. It was war as eternal stalemate, violence as futile repetition. The other gods had to keep functioning too. Helios still drove his chariot across the sky each day, though some mornings he emerged late, nursing injuries from stray attacks. Selene still brought night, though sometimes the moon ran red with ichor splashed across its surface. The Oceanids wept in their springs and rivers, watching the world tear itself apart. The winds, children of Titans themselves, didn't know which side to blow for, and ended up creating hurricanes of indecision that ravaged coastlines. Mortals, those golden humans who'd lived in paradise, began to suffer. The war disrupted seasons. Crops failed. Animals fled to the edges of the world. The rivers ran strange colors. The earth shook so often that buildings never had time to be rebuilt. The Golden Age ended not with a bang, but with 10 years of apocalyptic warfare that ground it into dust. Those perfect first humans began to die of starvation, of fear, of simple despair. Their spirits, which should have become peaceful guardians, turned restless and worried instead. Neither side could gain advantage. The young gods were powerful and motivated, but the Titans had experience and raw cosmic authority. Whenever Zeus seemed to be winning, Atlas would wade into battle and turn the tide. Whenever Cronus's forces pushed toward Olympus, Poseidon would crack open the earth beneath their feet, sending them tumbling back. It was deadlock, brutal, and complete. Both sides began to wear down. Even immortals have limits to their endurance. The valley between the mountains had been pounded so many times, it was now a crater. Mountains nearby had been leveled. The local seas had been boiled away and refilled and boiled again. Still, they fought, because neither side could imagine surrender. Zeus, frustrated and searching for anything that might tip the balance, remembered something. There were beings more ancient than even the Titans, beings who'd been imprisoned since before his birth, beings who had reason to hate Cronus. His grandmother Gaia whispered to him in dreams, "Go deeper, go to Tartarus, free what your father feared most." So Zeus made a decision that would change everything. While his siblings held the line on Olympus, he descended, not just underground, but beneath the foundations of the world, down past the roots of mountains, past the buried caves where Hades would one day rule, down to Tartarus itself. Tartarus wasn't just a prison. It was a conscious abyss, a void with personality, a place where reality grew thin and strange. It existed below everything, as far beneath the earth as the sky was above it. To reach it meant falling for 9 days straight, assuming you could even find the entrance. Zeus found it, because prophecy guided him, because his grandmother Gaia opened the way, because destiny demanded it. And there, in the deepest darkness, behind gates of bronze that would have kept anything mortal locked away for eternity, he found them, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, imprisoned all this time, first by Uranus, briefly freed by Cronus, then locked away again when Cronus's fear of them proved stronger than his gratitude. The Cyclopes, Brontes, Sterobes, and Arges had spent eons in darkness, their single eyes adjusted to blackness, their skill in forging unused. The Hecatoncheires, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges had curled themselves into corners, their 100 arms wrapped around their 50 heads, creating spheres of limbs and faces like nightmarish geometry. Zeus spoke to them, not as a king to subjects, but as a fellow victim of Cronus's paranoia. He offered them freedom, not just from this prison, but from ever being imprisoned again. He promised them a place in the new order, respect for their abilities, an end to their exile. All they had to do was help him win this war. The Cyclopes unfolded their massive frames, their single eyes blinking in the dim light Zeus had brought. They remembered his father. They remembered being swallowed by Gaia and then locked away by Uranus, remembered Cronus's brief liberation, then his betrayal when he re-imprisoned them. They had every reason to hate the Titans. "We will help you," Brontes said, his voice like thunder rolling up from underground. But first, we will make you weapons." The Hecatoncheires stirred as well, their many arms unfolding, stretching, testing their strength after so long compressed. "We remember the upper world," Cottus said. "We remember sky and air. Take us there. Give us enemies. We will show you what we can do." So Zeus led them up out of Tartarus, this strange collection of gods and monsters, bringing them to the forge caves where the Cyclopes could work. And while the war raged above, while his siblings bought him time with their own blood, the Cyclopes created. For Zeus, they forged the thunderbolt, not just a weapon, but the embodiment of storm and sky wrath, lightning made solid, capable of being wielded, but always yearning to return to cloud form. It crackled in his hand like something alive. For Poseidon, they made the trident, three-pronged and perfect, each prong inscribed with secrets of ocean and earthquake, a tool to command earth and water, to shake the foundations of continents. For Hades, they crafted the helm of darkness, a crown that wasn't just invisible, but made its wearer become shadow itself, unseeable, unknown, able to walk through enemy camps like a whisper. These weren't just weapons, these were symbols of dominion, tools that matched their wielders, that amplified what they already were. And when the three brothers returned to the battlefield, everything changed. Victory of the Olympians. The first time Zeus hurled his new thunderbolt, the world understood that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just powerful. This was authority made physical, the sky's rage given form. It struck the slope of Mount Othrys, and the entire mountain shuddered. Trees burst into flame. Rock turned to glass. The air itself screamed. The Titans, who'd been holding their own, suddenly looked worried. Poseidon drove his trident into the earth, and the valley floor split open. Chasms yawned wide enough to swallow armies. Water erupted from below, scalding hot, turning the battlefield into a maze of steam and sudden trenches. The Titans had to leap and scramble, their formations broken, their certainty shaken. Hades put on his helm and vanished. He walked unseen through Titan ranks, his presence like a cold wind, whispering doubts and fears. Warriors would turn to strike an enemy only to find themselves swinging at air while Hades cut them from behind. His psychological warfare was as devastating as his brother's raw power. But the real game-changer was the Hecatoncheires. These three brothers, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, emerged onto the battlefield like nothing the Titans had ever seen. Each had 50 heads, 100 arms, and centuries of stored rage. They positioned themselves on mountainsides and began to throw. Not just stones, boulders, entire sections of cliff face, trees ripped whole from the ground. The Hecatoncheires could throw with all 100 hands simultaneously, creating a rain of projectiles so dense it blocked out the sun. 100 throws per giant, 3 giants working in coordination, 300 massive objects hurled every few seconds. It was impossible to defend against. Shields shattered under the bombardment. Warriors had to shelter behind whatever cover they could find, but the Hecatoncheires just brought the cover down on top of them. Atlas tried to stand against them. He was the strongest being on either side, and he waded into the boulder storm, catching rocks and hurling them back. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually match them. But even Atlas had only 2 arms. The math was simple and brutal. 300 against 2. Eventually, a boulder caught him in the chest. then another in the shoulder, then 3 more in rapid succession, and even his incredible strength couldn't handle it. He went down, buried under rubble, and the Titan lines collapsed. The sky above the battlefield turned black with debris and storm clouds. Lightning arced between clouds, each bolt carrying Zeus's fury. The ground heaved with constant earthquakes. Rivers changed course, flowing uphill in defiance of nature because Poseidon commanded it. The sun struggled to rise, fighting against the smoke and ash filling the air. This was what cosmic war truly looked like. Not armies clashing, but reality itself being rewritten by violence. The younger gods pressed their advantage. Hera took to the air, stirring winds that pushed back against Creus's attempts at weather control. Demeter poisoned the ground beneath Titan feet, making plants with thorns like spears erupt wherever they stepped. Hestia, from her position at the Olympian camp, kept the sacred fire burning, and that fire seemed to fuel her siblings, giving them strength that never quite ran out. Cronus himself finally entered the fray. He'd been holding back, perhaps still believing his armies could win without him, perhaps afraid that engaging personally would confirm his defeat if he lost. But with his forces crumbling, he had no choice. He took up the adamantine sickle, the same weapon that had castrated his father, and descended from Othrys. The battle between Zeus and Cronus should have been mythically significant. Father versus son, old king versus new. But the truth was simpler and sadder. Cronus was tired. Years of paranoia had worn him down. The prophecy he'd tried so hard to avoid had come true anyway. And in coming true, it had proven that all his cruelty had been pointless. He swung his sickle, and Zeus caught it on a thunderbolt. The two weapons locked, divine metal against skyfire, and for a moment they were face to face. "You could have just raised us," Zeus said, his voice carrying over the battlefield noise. "We would have honored you. We would have kept you on your throne. This didn't have to happen." "The prophecy," Cronus began. "The prophecy happened because you tried to stop it," Zeus interrupted. "You made it come true." Then he pushed, hard, and Cronus stumbled back. Zeus struck him with the thunderbolt, not a killing blow, but a devastating one, and the Titan king fell to his knees. Around them, the other Titans saw their leader brought low and knew it was over. Some tried to flee. Hyperion turned and ran, his brightness dimming, but the Hecatoncheires caught him with a boulder. Iapetus attempted to rally a final stand, but Poseidon opened a chasm beneath him, and he fell, still fighting. Creus called the winds to carry him away, but Hades appeared from shadow behind him and struck him down. One by one, the Titans were captured. Those who'd fought against the Olympians were bound in chains, not regular chains, but bonds forged by the Cyclopes, unbreakable, eternal. The victorious younger gods dragged them toward the edge of the world, toward the entrance to Tartarus. Cronus, dazed and defeated, looked at his son one last time. "You'll become me," he said. "That's how it works. Power corrupts. You'll grow paranoid. You'll hurt those you should protect. The cycle will repeat." "Maybe," Zeus said. "Or maybe I'll learn from your mistakes." He didn't sound entirely convinced. The defeated Titans were cast into Tartarus, that primordial abyss at the bottom of everything. The Hecatoncheires, grateful for their freedom and enjoying their new role, agreed to serve as guards. They took up positions at the bronze gates, their many eyes always watching, their many arms ready to restrain any Titan who tried to escape. It was a perfect prison, because the guards were both grateful to the Olympians and ancient enemies of the prisoners. The Titans would stay locked away, conscious but powerless, for all eternity. Well, most of them. Some Titans had chosen wisely or remained neutral. Oceanus, who'd refused to fight, kept his position surrounding the world, his waters unconfined. Themis, who'd sided with Zeus, became one of his closest advisors. Prometheus, whose foresight had led him to the winning side, was honored with a place in the new order. Helios, Selene, and Eos, children of Hyperion, were too crucial to punish. The world needed sun, moon, and dawn. They kept their duties, but served the new regime. Atlas, however, was singled out. According to Hesiod and most ancient sources, he was given a unique punishment: to stand at the western edge of the world and hold up the sky itself, the heavens, not the earth, as is commonly misunderstood today. Homer's earlier account suggests Atlas supported pillars that kept earth and sky apart. But by Hesiod's time, the image had evolved to Atlas bearing the celestial vault directly on his shoulders. The weight of stars and clouds and the entire dome of heaven would rest upon him eternally, an infinite burden with no relief. To this day, in the ancient imagination, he stands there still, with poor posture and no gratitude, keeping the cosmos properly separated. It was a cruel punishment, but a necessary one in Zeus's view. Someone had to keep the sky from crashing down, and who better than the strongest being in existence? Atlas would serve as both prisoner and cosmic support beam. His strength turned to service, his rebellion transformed into an eternal task: the new order. With the Titans defeated and imprisoned, Zeus stood at the peak of Olympus and looked out over a broken world. The war had lasted 10 years. A decade of violence had reshaped geography, killed countless mortals, and ended the Golden Age permanently. The earth was scarred. The seas were troubled. The sky itself seemed uncertain, flickering between storm and calm. The first order of business was dividing the cosmos. The three brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, met to determine who would rule what. Some accounts say they drew lots, pulling sticks or casting dice, leaving the division to chance. Others say Zeus, as the liberator and de facto leader, simply assigned roles. Either way, the result was the same. Zeus took the sky, the air, and the weather. He would be king of the gods, arbiter of justice, controller of storms. His thunderbolt gave him ultimate authority. When he spoke, lightning emphasized his words. He claimed Mount Olympus as his throne, that highest peak where clouds gathered and eagles soared. Poseidon received the seas, all the waters salt and wild, the waves and tides, the storms that sank ships and the calms that saved them. He also claimed dominion over earthquakes and horses, both of which he'd allegedly created. His palace would be underwater, a structure of coral and pearl, impossible for mortals to reach. He was second in power only to Zeus, a fact he would sometimes resent. Hades drew the underworld, the realm of the dead. It's often portrayed as unlucky, the worst lot, but Hades himself never complained. Someone had to rule the dead, to maintain order in the afterlife, to ensure souls reached their proper destinations. His domain was the largest in a sense. Everyone eventually ended up there. He built his palace deep underground, on the banks of the river Styx, and took up his duties with grim dedication. He rarely visited Olympus, preferring his quiet realm to the politics and drama of the other gods. The earth itself was left common to all three, though in practice, Zeus had the most influence there since he controlled the weather that affected mortals' lives. But all three could walk the earth, interact with humans, father children, and generally cause trouble. With the cosmos divided, Zeus began establishing the new divine government. He invited certain titans to remain part of the order, those who'd helped or stayed neutral. Themis became his advisor, eventually his wife, though that marriage wouldn't last. She helped him establish laws and proper procedures. Mnemosyne preserved memory of these new laws. Prometheus served as an intermediary with humanity, which Zeus viewed with some ambivalence. The Olympian gods took up various roles. Hera, Zeus's sister, became his wife, eventually after Metis and Themis, goddess of marriage and family, queen of Olympus. Demeter oversaw agriculture and the harvest, crucial roles in a world recovering from war. Hestia maintained the sacred hearth, becoming goddess of home and domesticity. Zeus also began the family expansion that would define Greek mythology. He fathered Athena, born from his head after swallowing the pregnant Metis, Apollo and Artemis with the Titaness Leto, Hermes with the nymph Maia, Ares with Hera, Hephaestus also with Hera, though some say he was her child alone, Dionysus with the mortal Semele, and many others. Each child received divine duties, and together they formed the Olympian pantheon, the 12 major gods who would rule for the next age. But Zeus was never secure on his throne. He'd learned from Cronus what paranoia looked like, and while he tried to avoid his father's mistakes, prophecy and politics conspired to make him nervous anyway. The Moirai, the Fates, whom Themis had borne him, controlled destiny. Even Zeus couldn't overrule them completely. There were other primordial powers older than him, Nyx, whom even he feared, Eros, who could make any being fall in love, and Hecate, mysterious and powerful, who chose to serve him but didn't have to. The new order was more dynamic than the Titans' rule had been, but also more chaotic. Where the Titans had been distant and elemental, the Olympians were personal and interventionist. They took lovers among mortals, sired heroes, took sides in human wars, and generally couldn't leave well enough alone. The Golden Age's peace was replaced by the Heroic Age's constant drama. Humans began to change too. Without the easy abundance of the Golden Age, they had to work for survival. They farmed, built cities, developed technology. Prometheus gave them fire, which Zeus originally opposed. The king of gods wanted mortals kept simple and controllable. But Prometheus defied him, stealing fire from the divine forge and giving it to humanity, which earned him eternal punishment but also secured humanity's future. These new humans were harder, cleverer, more complicated than their Golden Age ancestors. They had arts and sciences. They had ambitions. They also had problems: war, disease, mortality, suffering. Pandora's jar would be opened, releasing troubles into the world. But humans persevered, and the Olympians, despite their flaws, proved more invested in human flourishing than the Titans had been. Still, the echoes of the Titan Age lingered. Sailors praying to Poseidon for safe passage remembered that Ocean was still ruled by Oceanus underneath it all. Farmers thanking Demeter for harvest knew that Earth herself, Gaia, was older and more fundamental than any Olympian. Poets invoking the Muses were calling on daughters of Mnemosyne, the Titan of memory. The old powers didn't disappear, they just stepped back, let the younger gods have the spotlight, and waited in the deep places. And in Tartarus, the imprisoned Titans brooded. They were conscious, aware, eternal. They couldn't escape, couldn't die, couldn't change their situation. They could only remember the age when they'd ruled, when the world was golden, when Cronus sat on the throne. They waited in darkness, and though most Greeks believed they'd stay there forever, there were whispers, prophecies, suggestions that one day they might return, that the wheel would turn again. But those were stories for another age. The legacy of the Titans. So what did it all mean? This age before Olympus, this time of Titans ruling the cosmos. It wasn't just ancient history, not just the backstory to the gods everyone knows. The Titan Age represented something fundamental about how the Greeks understood the world and their place in it. The Titans embodied natural law and cosmic order. They were the universe operating according to its own rules, powerful but impersonal. Oceanus was ocean, not a god who controlled the sea, but the sea itself given consciousness. Hyperion was light, Mnemosyne was memory, Themis was law. They were concepts made physical, abstractions given form. Under their rule, the cosmos functioned smoothly, but without personality, without the messy drama of individual consciousness. The Olympians, by contrast, were personal gods. Zeus got angry, played favorites, had affairs. Hera was jealous, Athena was proud. They were forces of nature, yes, but they were also individuals with personalities, quirks, and emotions. The transition from Titan to Olympian rule represented a shift in how Greeks thought about divinity, from impersonal cosmic principles to personal divine beings who could be bargained with, praised, or blamed. This reflected the Greek worldview that the universe was neither indifferent nor entirely rational. It had patterns and laws, the Titan legacy, but it also had will and purpose, the Olympian edition. You could study nature and learn its rules, but you also had to account for divine intervention, for the gods choosing to act in specific ways at specific times. The Titanomachy itself was more than just a war story. It was a myth about generational change, about old orders being replaced by new. Every culture needs a way to understand how things came to be as they are, why the gods who are worshipped now hold power. The war between Titans and Olympians provided that explanation. The current gods earned their positions through victory, through being strong enough and smart enough to overthrow the previous generation. But there's complexity there too. Zeus and his siblings weren't pure heroes. They were rebels, insurgents who overthrew the established order. In some ways, they were justified. Cronus had become a tyrant, but in other ways, they were simply ambitious. They wanted power for themselves. The myth doesn't present a simple morality tale. It shows a messy transfer of power where both sides have legitimate claims and serious flaws. Cronus especially is a tragic figure. He started as a liberator, the one brave enough to free his siblings from Uranus's tyranny. But fear and prophecy turned him into a tyrant worse than his father, willing to swallow his own children to maintain power. The myth warns that revolutionaries often become what they overthrew, that power corrupts even those who take it for good reasons. Zeus, though he tried to avoid his father's mistakes, would have his own issues. His affairs and favoritism caused endless problems, and his rule was marked by frequent conflicts. The prophecy element is crucial too. In Greek thought, fate was inescapable. The more you tried to avoid it, the more surely you brought it about. Uranus cursed Cronus with overthrow. Cronus tried to prevent it by swallowing his children. But that very act made Zeus hate him. and motivated the rebellion. If Cronus had just raised his kids normally, the prophecy might never have come true, or it might have meant something gentle, like retirement, rather than violent overthrow. The myth teaches that you can't escape destiny, and trying only makes things worse. The Titans themselves didn't vanish from Greek religion even after the myths established their defeat. Many continued to be worshipped, or at least acknowledged. Themis had temples and was invoked in oaths. Helios, Selene, and Eos were prayed to daily. Prometheus became a champion of humanity, his gift of fire making him more popular than many Olympians. The Titans represented older, perhaps deeper powers that couldn't simply be replaced, only built upon. Some scholars see the Titanomachy as a mythological reflection of actual historical changes. Perhaps the arrival of Greek-speaking peoples into the Aegean region, displacing or conquering earlier inhabitants with different gods. The Titans might represent pre-Greek deities, older gods of Minoan or other cultures, being subordinated to the new Olympian pantheon brought by Indo-European invaders. Whether or not this is literally true, the myth does capture that sense of cultural layering, of new religions incorporating and recontextualizing older ones. Philosophically, later Greeks found deep meaning in the Titan myths. The Orphic mysteries, for example, developed complex theologies around the Titans, suggesting that humans had Titan elements in their nature: violence, earthiness, mortality, mixed with divine elements, soul, intellect, potential for enlightenment. Plato referenced the Titans in his discussions of the soul and cosmic order. The Stoics used Titan imagery to discuss natural law and cosmic cycles. These weren't just entertaining stories, but frameworks for understanding existence itself. The punishment of the Titans also carried meaning. Tartarus represented the ultimate distance from divine order, the deepest possible exile. Yet the Titans couldn't be killed, only contained, which suggested that these primal forces couldn't be eliminated, only controlled. You can't destroy the concept of ocean or light or memory. You can only manage them, work with them, keep them from overwhelming everything else. The younger gods didn't erase the old order. They incorporated it, built on top of it, maintained relationship with it even in opposition. Atlas's specific punishment is particularly rich with meaning. He holds up the sky at the western edge of the world, keeping heaven and earth separated. This represents the establishment of cosmic order. Space must exist between realms for the world to function properly. When Gaia and Uranus were locked together, nothing could happen between them. Everything was trapped. The separation of earth and sky allowed for the middle realm, where gods and mortals could exist. Atlas, the strongest Titan, performs this crucial task against his will. His rebellion turned to cosmic necessity. Its punishment, yes, but also service. Even in defeat, the Titans serve essential functions. The places associated with Titans became sacred sites in the Greek world. Mount Othrys, their fortress, remained a real mountain in Thessaly, where Greeks left offerings to older gods. The spots where Titans supposedly fell or fought became shrines. Delphi, where the stone from Cronus's stomach was placed, became the most famous oracle in Greece. The Greeks didn't just tell these stories, they mapped them onto their landscape, making mythology inseparable from geography, giving every traveler a chance to walk where gods had walked. And in daily Greek life, the Titans never fully disappeared. When a sailor felt wind change, he might thank the descendants of Creus who controlled those currents. When a woman gave birth, she might pray to Rhea, the great mother who'd suffered through childbirth more than any goddess. When scholars wanted to remember complex information, they invoked mnemosyne. When judges rendered verdicts, they swore by Themis. The Titans were there in the background, the foundation upon which Olympian religion was built. There's also something deeply human about the Titan myths that made them resonate across centuries. The family drama, fathers fearing children, children rebelling against parents, siblings choosing sides, prophecies that come true through attempts to prevent them. These are universal themes. Every generation worries about being replaced. Every child struggles with parental authority. Every family has its tensions and its alliances. The Titans and Olympians, despite being cosmic forces, enacted very human conflicts on a divine scale. The Golden Age itself became a powerful cultural touchstone. Greeks looked back on it as a lost paradise, a time before suffering, before work, before death had meaning. It was their Garden of Eden, their pre-lapsarian state. And like all such myths, it served to explain why life is hard now, because the Golden Age was destroyed in divine warfare, because Pandora's jar was opened, because humanity fell from grace. But it also provided hope, the idea that perfect peace had existed once and might exist again, that the current age of struggle wasn't eternal. Later, Romans adopted these myths wholesale, renaming the gods. Cronus became Saturn, Zeus became Jupiter, but keeping the essential stories. The Roman festival of Saturnalia, held in December, celebrated a temporary return to the Golden Age. Slaves and masters switched roles for a day. Social rules were suspended, gifts were exchanged, and chaos reigned in joyful commemoration of Saturn's rule. Even in Rome, centuries after these myths originated, people longed for that lost age of Titan rule when everything was supposedly simpler. Christian writers later reinterpreted Titan myths through their own lens. They saw the war between Titans and Olympians as parallel to the fall of Lucifer and the rebel angels. The Titans became analogous to demons, powerful beings cast down for rebelling against proper authority, imprisoned in an underworld realm, forever separated from divine presence. This interpretation, while foreign to the original Greek meaning, shows how adaptable these stories were, how they could be reshaped to fit new religious contexts. Modern readers might see other meanings. The environmental message that Gaia, Earth herself, became distressed when her children were imprisoned and oppressed, that she supported revolution to restore balance. The feminist angle, that the story begins with Gaia's suffering and agency, that Rhea's cunning saves her son and ends a cycle of cruelty, that multiple goddesses, Themis, Mnemosyne, Metis, play crucial roles. The psychological reading that the Titans represent unconscious forces, primal drives, fundamental aspects of psyche that can't be destroyed, only integrated or contained. The sheer scope of the Titan mythology, spanning from void to creation to civilization, gives it an epic quality that few other mythological cycles match. It's a complete cosmogony, explaining how everything came to be, why things work the way they do, who holds power, and why. It starts before time and extends into an eternal future. It includes everyone from primordial abstractions like chaos to very personal gods like Zeus, to mortal humans, to monsters and everything between. Its mythology is total world building, creating not just stories, but an entire universe with its own internal logic. And perhaps most importantly, the Titan Age represents potential. It was the first try at divine government, the prototype that would be refined into the Olympian system. It was the world in its youth, still figuring things out, still making mistakes. The transition from Titans to Olympians wasn't just a change in rulers. It was cosmic evolution, the universe learning and adapting, growing more complex and more personal. If the Titans were the thesis, the Olympians were the antithesis. And perhaps whatever came after, if anything ever did, would be the synthesis. So here we are, at the end of the beginning, standing at that moment when Titan rule ended and Olympian rule began. We've traveled from the void of chaos through the birth of earth and sky, through the castration that separated them, through the golden age and its slow corruption, through the swallowing of children and the rise of Zeus, through 10 years of cosmic war, through victory and punishment and the establishment of new order. We've met beings whose very names are concepts: ocean, memory, law, light. We've watched a father so afraid of prophecy that he became exactly what he feared. We've seen a mother choose her children over her husband, choose the future over the past. We've witnessed the first divine war, the template for every conflict that would follow in mythology and perhaps in history. The Titans ruled the cosmos first, and in many ways they still do. They're the fundamental forces, the building blocks, the axioms from which everything else is derived. The Olympians added personality and drama, but they couldn't have existed without the Titan foundation. Zeus's thunder needed Hyperion's light to be seen, Oceanus's waters to crash upon, Gaia's earth to strike against. Every Olympian power was built on Titan principles. If you've enjoyed this journey back to the age before Olympus, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Maybe leave a comment about what part of the Titan myths resonated with you. But for now, let the Titans rest in their eternal prison. Let the Golden Age remain a beautiful memory. Let the echoes of divine war fade into silence. Let the stories settle like dust after battle, covering everything in the soft patina of ages past. The Titans had their moment. The Olympians would have theirs. And someday, perhaps, new gods will rise from depths we can't yet imagine, overthrowing the overthrown, continuing the cycle, proving that even eternity has its patterns and its seasons. But for now, just rest. The cosmos is stable, held up by Atlas's tired shoulders. The Olympians rule from their mountain. The stories are told, passed down through generations, reaching even here, even now, even you. Sleep well, knowing that the age of the Titans, though ancient beyond measure, still echoes in every myth you know, every story that came after, every understanding we have of how things began and why they are as they are. They were the first gods, and first things always matter, always persist, always remain present, even when they seem to have vanished into the past. The Titans ruled, the Titans fell, the Titans endure, and their stories, like them, are eternal. Good night.